The stars are right, and that means it's time for another episode of The Whispering Darkness. I'm your host, the manfromleng. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, we are going to be talking about Return to the Forgotten Age, the new deluxe or upgrade expansion that was just announced today for the Arkham Horror LCG. I was planning on making a video about this in my traditional style, but I decided, hell, why not? Let's stream it and talk about this new upgrade expansion live together. We all knew it was coming, and the announcement dropped today, so we have our first look at it here, and we'll see what's inside and what everyone out there in the community thinks about it. Hello everybody, welcome to the stream. Glad you could make it tonight. We are talking about Return to the Forgotten Age. Now, everybody knew this was going to be coming down the pipe at some point. It was just a matter of when, not if. And I checked my Fantasy Flight today, and of course they had the announcement up. So we are going to dig into that tonight. Take a look at some of the spoiled new encounter cards from the new encounter sets, as well as a couple of the spoiled player cards that were revealed. And take a look at how this may change up the Forgotten Age campaign, which is a pretty, I think it's a bit of a divisive one in the Arkham Horror LCG community. There are some people who really like this campaign, and others who are much more on the fence. I would consider myself very much on the fence about this campaign after coming out with two pretty strong campaigns in the Dunwich Legacy and the Path to Carcosa, especially Path to Carcosa, it being one of the most probably the most popular campaign that has been released for this game. The Forgotten Age came, and I think it has an extremely strong start. I think Untamed Wild and the Doom of Estley are some of my favorite scenarios that I still play. I also enjoy Threads of Fate, and then things get a little bit rockier once we hit the Boundary Beyond, which is one of the most difficult scenarios in the, probably, if not in the campaign, in the entire game. It is very difficult to come out of that one. And most of the time you're just trying to survive, much less thrive in that one. So if you can get a good result in that one, then you can count yourself lucky. Now that the Boundary Beyond leads into what I think unfortunately is the worst scenario of the campaign, if not the entire game, Heart of the Elders Part 1. Any of you who caught my stream of Roland Banks and Joe Diamond trying to make it through Heart of the Elders Part 1 will understand my frustration with that campaign. And I think the success or failure of this upgrade expansion is going to hinge a lot on how or if the updated scenario cards and updated encounter cards are able to fix that scenario, because I think as it stands, it is simply not very good and a huge impediment to playing the rest of the campaign. If you look at my play record alone, the number of plays of scenarios after Heart of the Elders drops off considerably, because I simply just don't want to play Heart of the Elders, and so my campaigns usually end at the Boundary Beyond. So I am hoping that designer Matt Newman has done something, pulled some tricks out of his hat to be able to fix that scenario and make it a little less repetitive. I don't think I've gotten out of it without playing it at least 8 times every time I have to go through that thing. And so, and after that, I mean, Heart of the Elders Part 2 isn't too bad. City of Archives, I enjoy. It is a bit gimmicky because you are playing as a Yithian, and so a lot of the deck tech you've put in your deck no longer works. Of course, your investigator card doesn't function as a traditional investigator anymore, so any of the little tricks you have that work with that don't work anymore. But I do enjoy that scenario. And then Depths of Yoth I quite like. And Shattered Aeons, unfortunately, is the scenario that I have played the least. I think I have only played it once. We didn't even get to it in in our Iron Man at Arkham Nights 2019. We decided to call it at Depths of Yoth. So that is one campaign, one scenario I am looking forward to revisiting. Excuse me, I'm still battling this bronchitis that seems to last for months and months. So welcome to the stream. Before we get into the Return to the Forgotten Age box itself, I would like to thank the patrons of the channel for their tremendous support. These people are absolutely fantastic, and I am eternally grateful for them stepping up to the plate with their hard-earned cash and sending a little bit of it my way to help support the channel's costs and whatnot. It is greatly appreciated. If you would like to become a patron of the channel and be one of these fantastic people and get your name up on this list, head over to patreon.com and sign up for a tier of your choice and claim your rewards. That would be awesome. So we have Return to the Forgotten Age was announced today. The article contains quite a bit of information, although most of it is fairly standard at this point. This is the third upgrade expansion for the game that we've had so far, and it doesn't stray too far from the path. We have new scenario cards, of course, that change up how the scenarios are played. We have some new encounter sets that replace the encounter sets that were released during the Forgotten Age cycle, so you get slightly different encounter cards, as well as you get some new player cards and some new objectives and achievements to achieve. So if you can, kill Yig in the Depths of Yoth, or make it through I believe one of them is make it through the entire campaign without being poisoned, you can get an achievement. Now, of course, one of the big highlights of these boxes is the new player cards, and there are probably going to be 10 of them, I think, 2 for each class. We already know what 5 of them are. The article spoils Survival Knife level 2 and On Your Own level 3. And from the card fan, we can also see Truth from Fiction. That is the Seeker card, the Seeker event that gives you secrets on your assets. Mists of Rillier, the amazing evasion card that came out in the Forgotten Age expansion. There was also an upgrade for it. I believe it was level 4 or 5, so I imagine that this one will fill in the gap somewhere in the middle, so you can, rather than make that big upgrade just all the way from, say, 1 to 5 or 1 to 4, you have a stopping point in the middle. Probably also works very well with Arcane Research. And there is also an upgrade for the Chthonian Stone, but we don't know, of course, what level that is. So if there are 10 player cards, that means there are only 5 missing. So it's anybody's guess what they could be. Designer Matt Newman tends to pick cards that are that haven't seen a great deal of play in the past, and tries to give them a little bump up in power so that so the upgrades are a little more attractive. So we'll have to, maybe we can take a look at the list later in this stream and see what other potential cards that we may see. You may already have some favorites on your list that you would like to see upgrade here in Return to the Forgotten Age. Of course, one of the big, we always look forward to new scenario cards and encounter cards, and this article spoils a couple of them. Of course, the Forgotten Age was already knee-deep in snakes, and we get a couple of more snakes or snake-themed cards spoiled for us in this preview article. The first is a location called Snake Pit. It is a 1-shroud location with 1 clue per investigator. It has the Ancient and Ruins trait, and it has the forced effect. After you put Snake Pit into play by exploring successfully, but before moving to it, spawn 1 per investigator. Set aside Pit Viper enemies in Snake Pit to a maximum of 3. Check your supplies. If an investigator at your location has binoculars, you may choose not to move to the Snake Pit. Otherwise, you must move to it and encounter all of those pit vipers. So this is a excuse me. This is an interesting card for a couple of reasons. First of all, the set aside pit viper enemies. I don't know whether we're going to be getting a bunch more pit vipers, or we are just going to they're going to take that encounter set of pit vipers that they had and take those out, and those will just be set aside, and then you can encounter them in the snake pit. I believe the pit vipers, there are only 3 that come with the Forgotten Age box, so this would, I guess, theoretically be all of them if you happen to be playing a 3 or 4 player game. It's interesting that this is, yeah, I was just going to mention that, Dan Smith, K7. The binoculars do have other uses in the campaign. I believe in Heart of the Elders, they can protect you from when it's the act advances from during 1 to 1B, I think. The binoculars come into play. Somebody, if they have the binoculars, they can act as the spotter, and they can see an enemy coming. And so if you've got binoculars, you don't encounter the enemy, but if you don't, then you do encounter them. So of course, this is the second thing I wanted to talk about, is this also raises the possibility of new things for the supplies to do. So if it wasn't difficult enough already to pick the supplies heading into this campaign, these new encounter cards are going to throw a whole bunch of new wrenches into play, and it will be especially a blind playthrough of the full campaign will be very interesting to navigate, because it won't be guaranteed that the supplies that were good in the past will be good in the future. Perhaps some of the supplies that didn't get quite as much love in the deluxe box will get a little bit more love in this upgrade. So taking things like, I know the binoculars were one. I think the compass has a few things that are worthwhile. There's the pendant. I think the pendant only comes into play in City of Archives, so that might get a little bit of an upgrade. The blanket is good at between Untamed Wilds and Doom of Estley. It gives you the experience. Hello, Hero Logic. Welcome to the stream. Glad you could make it. We're talking about Return to the Forgotten Age tonight. That was just announced today by FFG, so we're taking a look at the encounter cards and some of the player cards, and chatting about what we would like to see in this box when it drops. So yeah, Snake Pit offers us a couple of interesting... it's also interesting that Snake Pit is one of the ruins locations. Now, presumably, this is... I see by the connection symbols, it would be connected to Circuitous Trail, Serpent's Haven, and the ruins of Estley. So this may be replacing one. I think there was Overgrown Ruins, Temple of the Fang, and one other one. So this may be replacing those cards, or it may be an addition to it. We don't know. Maybe it's an addition to, maybe there'll be 4 locations. We don't know. So maybe there'll be more locations to sort through in Untamed Wilds. And if you get very unlucky and draw the Snake Pit, you could be knee-deep in Pit Vipers and have to deal with those. Of course, the side effect of having to deal with 1 to 3 Pit Vipers is your Vengeance total is also going to go up. So making those, trying to keep your Vengeance total as low as you can is going to be very difficult if you fall into this snake pit and you suddenly have to either kill or evade 3 vipers to get out. So perhaps bring your binoculars just to be sure that the snake pit won't befall you. Yes, Hero Logic, this is the campaign I would like to see improved as well, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. Now, one of the other enemies spoiled was this Vengeful Serpent. Great art here by, I can't quite read the name, Pindado. But yeah, great art. It's a 2 fight, 2 health, 2 evade enemy humanoid monster serpent hunter. And after you draw Vengeful Serpent, draw each Vengeful Serpent in the victory display as well. I could see this being this may be a replacement for maybe the Fang of Yig, or the what's the small one? I can't remember the small one's name. The Serpent of Yig or something like that. I can't remember. There's the 2 enemies in the encounter set, Fang of Yig being one of them. Perhaps this is a replacement for that. So of course, if you happen to find one of these, you will have to fight it as well as all of the buddies that you have encountered through the course of the scenario. So that could be very nasty, depending on, of course, how many Vengeful Serpents we have. I believe there'll probably be at least 2 or 3, so that could be a sort of revisiting the swarm mechanic, but in a slightly different way. So instead of just running into one Vengeful Serpent, you're going to have 2 or 3 to deal with. So evading these guys and keeping them out of the victory display is going to be very important until you are near the end. I see they're worth Vengeance 0, so killing them isn't necessarily a bad idea. Of course, you don't want to do that. If you encounter one, you'd probably want to try to evade it and leave it alone. But of course, it does have Hunter, so it's going to chase you down. So that's going to be a balancing act that players are going to have to deal with. Hello, Bruce. Welcome to the stream. Glad you could make it. That's true. There is Bruce raises the point that there is no poison weakness associated with the attack, so that is nice for those low agility investigators who were happening to get poisoned. I know that the Fang of Yig, one Fang of Yig, took out both Roland Banks and Joe Diamond when we were playing Heart of the Elders Part 2. So I'll be happy not to see that poison weakness connection. Although, given that the poison weakness is sort of central to this campaign, I'm sure that there will be other ways that the poison weakness will be involved in some way, and you will definitely not want to be poisoned. Hero Logic raises the point, or stock up on dynamite. Yeah, that would also help. They are pretty weak. It's only 2 health, which isn't too bad. 2 fight, 2 evade. It's pretty easy. Its biggest issue is the swarm, but it's not. I don't think it's any worse than any of the swarm enemies that we have seen in Dream Eaters, at least that I've seen so far. I can't remember what the swarm of spiders is. I think it's 1-2-1 or something like that, or 1-1-1. I can't remember, but it's certainly not too bad. Just having to kill 2 or 3 of them would be a real pain. They don't hit that hard either, but of course having that hunter keyword is a bit of a pain. There are other encounter cards as well. There are new tricks for the Yithians as well as the cultists in this scenario. One of the spoiled encounter cards is the Alien Conservatory. It is a 2-shroud location with 1 clue. It has the Ancient and Nakotas traits. While you are in the Alien Conservatory, decrease your maximum hand size by 2, and it has the action test 1 willpower. If you succeed, test 2 agility. If you succeed, test 3 intellect. If you succeed, remember that you saw a familiar specimen. So this card raises a couple points. One, obviously, this is going in City of Archives. There's no other scenario that you could play this in. I love the art on this one, where they have the various specimens that the Yithians have collected over the millennia in their little glass jars, or whatever those glass display cases are. Obviously, if you're playing City of Archives, you want to keep your hand size as high as it can go. And so any location that decreases your maximum hand size by 2 is going to be a bad one. And that's what happens here. But I think what's worse about this is that it has this mechanic that we've seen a little bit in Dream Eaters, where you have to test three different abilities, skills in succession, and if you fail one of those tests, it's all for naught. And I know I was just playing a prep game for my run through of Waking Nightmare last night, and there is that test on Randolph Carter. I think it's a willpower followed by an intellect test. Now, there are only, I think it's only 2 willpower and 2 intellect that you need to pass, but I have failed those tests more times than I can count. So passing 1 test, not that bad. Passing 2 tests, now things get a little bit more interesting, and this ups the ante a little bit more. Now you've got to pass 3 tests, a willpower, an agility, and a intellect test, the intellect test being the hardest of them. So I suspect willpower 1, that's not too bad. Of course, the -5 is still quite capable of taking out a high willpower investigators such as Agnes or Akachi. 2 agility, again, not too bad for your rogues, for Wendy, investigators like that. Ursula, she can easily handle that. And then that intellect 3, again, the Seekers come into the fore there, and they are going to have an easier time of that. So it will be interesting to see how getting you probably want to get into this location, get that test done as quickly as you can, and then get out so your maximum you can bring your maximum hand size up. Poor Patrice in this location has a maximum hand size of 3. If she's got her weakness in her hand, she'd be down to 2 cards. That would be pretty... Actually, no. Because she'd be a Yithian, so no, it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter for Patrice. So the other thing to note about this card is that, of course, it adds another objective to the City of Archives, that being you saw a familiar specimen. Now, we don't know whether that will be simply added to the list of objectives that you need to achieve, or whether it will be an option. The probabilities hero logic for linked tests is pretty bad. Yeah, you need to. They get progressively hard. To pass 1 is fine, but each test you add on top of that gets progressively harder to pass all 3. So saw a familiar specimen. Will that be in addition to all the other ones we want, or will it just be like you can do? It'll be one of the 5 or 6 options that you can get. I think you want, there are a total of 6, so either this will be a 7th or a replacement for one of the other ones. So we'll have to see. The cultists encounter set, those nasty, probably the worst cultists in the game. I forget their names, but man, they are a pain in the butt. They get, from another time, it's a scheme revelation, test 4 intellect. Place X doom on cultist enemies in play, divided it as evenly as possible. X is the amount you fail by. If you fail and there are no cultist enemies in play, instead search the encounter deck and discard pile for a cultist enemy and draw it. Shuffle the encounter deck. Wow, that's 4 doom if you fail this thing. If you pull a tentacle on this and add 4 doom to a cultist enemy, that you could go from not advancing the agenda deck for several turns to advancing it the very next turn. That could be pretty bad. This card is very reminiscent of Mysterious Chanting from the core set. Mysterious Chanting, for those of you who haven't seen it in a while, it's a revelation. Place 2 doom on the nearest cultist enemy, and if there are no cultist enemies in play, and the nearest, so you'd place 2 doom on the nearest cultist enemy. If there are no cultist enemies, search the encounter deck and discard pile for a cultist enemy and draw it. So while there is, it's sort of like a Mysterious Chanting. Mysterious Chanting just dumps the doom on you, and there's nothing you can do about it. This, from another time, at least gives you a chance to pass the test and not have to deal with that doom. But for intellect, that's not That's not easy. That's an above average intellect skill test. So that's not going to be easy for a lot of investigators besides those, the Mandys and Normans of the world and the Daisies who have the 5. So a new take on mysterious chanting. I don't know. I don't mind I like the idea of taking a test, but the possibility of adding 4 doom is a ton of doom to drop into play all at once. And if I remember, there's not very many like a lot of the doom thresholds in this one in the Forgotten Age are quite short compared to the ones in say Circle Undone, where they all seem to be like 8 and 8 plus. These ones tend to be a little shorter, so 4 doom is a significant amount of doom to dump on somebody in one to dump on the table in one go. Of course, we also get new player cards, which is always a big excitement, a big draw for players. One of the ones that we know about is Survival Knife Level 2. It is an asset. Same cost as a Survival Knife Level 0. It has 2 combat skill icons, so we gain a combat skill icon. It has, of course, the same traits, item, weapon, and melee. As an action you may fight, you get +2 for this for your combat skill test for this attack instead of +1, so it's slightly more powerful, but this is the biggie on this card. The response has changed. When an enemy attacks you during the enemy phase before resolving that attack, exhaust Survival Knife. Fight. This attack targets the attacking enemy. You get +2 combat and deal +1 damage for this attack. Yeah, Dan, this is a very nice card. It happens before the attack. As you may remember here, on Survival Knife 0, you get that counter attack, but only after the enemy deals damage to you. So you were forced to sort of sacrifice some of your health if you wanted to get that action advantage. Survival Knife 0 level 2 places that attack before the attack happens. So now you can get all that action advantage, and very likely that attack will never happen. So you will not be taking any more damage. This seems to me like I would want one of these in just about every Guardian deck, if only to get that extra attack during the enemy phase in case something goes awry during the investigation phase and one of your attacks misses and you aren't able to kill it. This lets you pull out that extra attack before you get attacked, and you do get +2. The attack is the same as the level 0 version on the response, +2 combat and +1 damage. So it's a little beefier when it's attacking normally, and then it's that attack being placed before the attack resolves is great. I think a lot of players are going to love this version of the Survival Knife. A very nice upgrade to pick up for the Guardians. The other card they spoiled is a very interesting one. It is On Your Own. Now, On Your Own was released in I'm trying to think of I believe it was City of Archives, and it cost 2, and it was a 3 experience point card. It was limit 1 per investigator. Discard On Your Own if you control an asset that takes up the ally slot, and as a response, you could play a survivor event on your and exhaust On Your Own to reduce that event cost by 3. So rather than beef up the experience point cost on Your Own, they've left the experience point cost the same, but given it the exceptional trait. So now it costs 6 experience points, but it's permanent. So it starts the game in play, and your investigator gains the deck building restrictions, no assets that take up the ally slot. So rather than the previous version, which gave you the option of playing allies and then having to discard On Your Own if you ever do happen to control an ally, this simply takes the option away from you. Yeah, Dan, this seems a lot like the the card should have been originally. It's basically the same idea but implemented slightly differently. The exceptional keyword bumps the experience point cost up to 6, which, if you want it, I mean, obviously the designers feel like this is going to, the ability to start with this in play is worth the 3 extra experience points. And of course the response is exactly the same. So you're paying 3 extra experience points for this thing to start into play. And I mean, if you've given up your ally slot, or you were planning on giving up your ally slot, this makes a lot of sense that you would simply you just want this in play. You don't want to have to hunt through your deck to find this card just to get your strategy online. So I think it makes a lot of sense from a deck building perspective to change this to a permanent card and simply remove the ally slot option. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that you can't play allies. Of course, there are some scenarios that will gift you an ally at some point. So if you happen to, say, pick up Alejandro at some point during the Forgotten Age campaign, you can still have him in play during that scenario. Now, what I'm not sure is that whether the story assets count against this ally slot. I suspect they do, but maybe not. Who knows? But so yeah, no assets that take up the ally slot. Of course, you can still play this if you wanted to in Ashcan Pete. You'd still have Duke to hang around. Now the response is exactly the same, and that means to each turn you get to reduce the cost of one survivor event by 2. Now what that means is that basically every survivor event in the game is free, except these 5. There are 40 survivor events available, so there are lots to choose from. They would all be free if you exhaust on your own, except these ones. Cunning Distraction costs 5, so it would go down to a 3. Trial by Fire would cost you 1, True Survivor would cost you 1, Waylay would cost you 1, and Will to Survive would cost you 2. So if you're looking for survivor events and you want to try an on your own deck, there is absolutely no all your events, at least once per turn, you get a free event. So that leaves you a lot of deck building options with starting on your own on the table. Now it's interesting, I went to see whether there were many on your own decks built, and I took a peek over at Arkham DB, and I could not find there aren't that many decks that include the first version of On Your Own. We'll see if that changes now that we've got a second, but just to give you some frame of reference, here are a couple of On Your Own decks that I believe the one is by Dace and the other is by Black Lionheart, I think. I could be getting those names wrong. My apologies if I did. But this is, we've got a Wendy Adams deck and a Calvin Wright deck. Both of these are using On Your Own 3, and as you can see, neither of them have any allies in them. And then you just have, in Wendy's case, she gets that synergy with her amulet. So if she gets her amulet in play, she can play events for cheap and from her discard pile. This particular deck features Emergency Cash 2, True Survivor, Will to Survive, and Winging It. And the Calvin deck has twice as many events, and it is packed with a Test of Will, a couple of those. It's got Against All Odds, Fight or Flight, Lucky, Perseverance, True Survivor, Ward of Protection. That one won't count, of course, because that is a Mystic event, and you don't get the discount on that one. Will to Survive and Winging It. So in that Calvin deck, the only ones you're going to have to pay for are a True Survivor and Will to Survive, I believe. So if you're interested in taking an On Your Own deck for a spin, there are a couple of options. You can also head over to Arkham DB and there's about a page worth. There aren't that many, but not very many have received any sort of response from the community. But looking through those sorts of decks may inspire you to build your own and take it for a spin, at least in standalone mode, to see how this new whether this new version of On Your Own works. I have a feeling that it will totally replace the old version. I don't imagine, I just can't see anybody bothering to play the previous version now that they can have one that starts the game in play. So that is those are the player cards, and that is our look at the Return to the Forgotten Age. Of course, there are a lot of questions that we have regarding the scenarios themselves, how much they will change. This campaign could really use a bit of a few tweaks along the way, and so I think this one probably more, this upgrade expansion probably more than any other is going to be really interesting to see whether these upgrades, whether this type of expansion product can change the scenarios enough to fix some of the problems that players see in the current Forgotten Age campaign as it stands. For me, I mean, the whole Boundary Beyond Heart of the Elders issue is a big one for me. I mean, every campaign has that scenario in it that is a bit of a block. When I play the Lord of the Rings LCG, for example, the thing about that is that you're not playing a campaign. The six adventure packs come out, but there's no you don't have to play them in order. There's no, the story may be shared between them, but there's no progression from one to the next. And that was one of the things that really worried me about the Arkham Horror LCG and the way that its campaign is structured, because you're playing those scenarios sequentially, and if you hit one that you either A, don't like, or B, is too difficult, or C, all of the above, that is going to be a real impediment to finishing the campaign. And I've seen it in my case, and I'm sure other players are the same, where they hit that scenario and they it stops them dead in their tracks. Now, I think designer Matt Newman has done a pretty good job over the previous two campaigns of keeping those scenarios to a minimum. I think the Dunwich Legacy, for me, Undimensioned and Unseen, can be a bit of a barrier, especially if you're playing a low willpower investigator. That can be a real, very difficult. But the nice thing about that is that you can basically skip Undimensioned and Unseen and skip right to Where Doom Awaits, and you're really not losing anything. You're losing some VPs, of course, and a little bit of experience, but I find it doesn't really cost you too much in the end. For the Path to Carcosa, the one set in Paris was the one for me that it wasn't nearly the stumbling block that some of the other scenarios have been. Like I don't mind playing a Phantom of Truth on Conviction or Doubt. The one where you're I forget whether it's chasing or evading, but you do need sort of a particular kind of deck to do really well at that scenario. You need something that can evade really well. And if you don't happen to have that, you could be in a whole heap of trouble. But it's not nearly the barrier that I would say Heart of the Elders is for me in this one. Boundary Beyond has really grown on me the more I play it. I quite like it from a mechanical standpoint. I really think it's I like the challenging aspect of it, and I like it mechanically, and I like how it plays, and it always has a lot of really interesting decision points in it as you're going through trying to navigate this maze of locations that keeps changing on you and trying to keep them flipped. I find that really interesting. I just find that if you don't get a good ending, which is very hard, it can completely it really can shut down a campaign, because you really need to do well in Boundary Beyond. Otherwise, you'll never gain Ichitaka's trust, and so you can never complete her storyline. And then, of course, you've got the pillar issue that comes into play in Heart of the Elders, where if you only enter Heart of the Elders with one pillar, suddenly you've got to replay this scenario multiple times just to get past it, so you can continue. So, who knows? Maybe I don't see Heart of the Elders 1 and Heart of the Elders 2 becoming just one scenario. I don't think that would take quite a bit of re-engineering. But I mean, maybe there's something they could do. I always thought there was something they could do with the act deck or the agenda deck, where if it flips over rather than ending the game, you reset, and there's some sort of mechanic that happens to punish you for taking too long. Not too punishing, but just enough to sort of say, okay, you really need to pick up the pace here and get this done, rather than just saying, okay, game over, let's reset this, let's restart and do it all over again. So, you end up with the situation at Arkham Knights where we played it once, we're just like, screw this is way too much, we're going to be here all night at this rate. And then you just say, well, if you brought gasoline to the party, you can basically just infinitely repeat drawing your hand and the location you need to find until you get the right combination you want. You just do that infinitely, get the location and the cards you want, and then play it from there. And that's not how the game is supposed to be played. But if players are feel that they have to go to that length just to get through a scenario, there's something definitely wrong there. As for the rest of the scenarios, I don't really think there's an issue with them. I think a lot of them are good. I know a lot of people don't like, some people don't like City of Archives, and it is a bit gimmicky. It was one I was looking forward to because, of course, you get to play as a Yithian, and that's every H.P. Lovecraft fan's dream to inhabit that Yithian body and get to play around in their headspace. But mechanically, it takes all that work you've put into that investigator and sort of strips it away for a session. And I can definitely see why some people don't like that, as well as the scenario itself can be a bit finicky. I find it usually goes pretty well until you're trying to complete the objectives, and then it always seems like you just get stalled and you're trying to like get one more, or the enemies on the board begin to move around in such a way that it's really hard to get that fourth and fifth location or objective. And then, of course, as that the agenda ramps up, your hand size starts to drop, and then hand size management becomes a real problem. And so I can understand why some people don't enjoy that scenario. But I mean, Depths of Yoth, they have how low can you go? They had how low you can go at Arkham Knights. They had it at Beneath the Waves in Portland. So that sort of scenario is obviously enjoyed by the community. So what is everybody in the chat looking for? I'll take a couple questions here, and we'll see what you guys what are you looking forward to in this upgraded. In this upgrade expansion. I should take a quick look actually at the card list and see what we have in terms of cards for that are potential upgrades, because there's Dan Smith K7 says, I just hope the beginning is not as hard to start or better supplies. Well, that's actually, you raise a good point. We've talked a lot about new encounter cards and new player cards, but we haven't talked about the possibility of them actually adding new supplies. That is a good point, man. I guess you could look at that at two ways. You could have new supplies. Maybe they up the supply total a little bit. So they give, I'm not sure how many points you get at the beginning, but maybe they give you a few more points to spend on supplies. Or perhaps they introduce entirely new supplies. That would be, I guess if they did introduce a new supply, you would be like, well, obviously I need this for this campaign, because they wouldn't put this new supply in the game if you didn't need it. So everybody would pick it. So probably not a new supply, but maybe a new supply, a few more supply points. Hero Logic says, I don't care for the supply system. Yeah, I certainly understand that perspective. I'm not sure I'm wild about it either, but that's more because I just like to sit down and play. And I just want to be able to sit down, play a bunch of scenarios in an evening, and do that at a pretty good clip. And my biggest beef with the Untamed Wilds, I love the scenario, but having to sit down in advance and pick supplies, I basically don't do that anymore. I just say, forget it. I'm not going to bother picking supplies. I'll just play it either without supplies, or I'll play whichever supplies come up first. Like if I need the map, okay, I have the map. If I need the water bottle, okay, I've had the water bottle, and just keep track of it that way, rather than sit down and pick supplies out there. I know ahead of Arkham Knights, a lot of the Iron Man teams, there was a supply list going that was making the rounds. That was the quote-unquote ideal list of supplies to pick if you were in a 4-player group, and then going through and saying like, okay, so-and-so should take this and that, this investigator should take this and that. And it wasn't always like that investigator was going to use that supply. That investigator was taking it for somebody else to use. But that sort of micromanaging, I think, is, that's beyond a lot of groups. A lot of groups don't want to sit there and micromanage a supply system before they sit down and play. They just want to sit down, have some fun with their friends, and get on with it. They don't want to have a spreadsheet laid out with which investigator is best with which supply. Dan Smith says, at least give more options to get rid of poison, to not make meds and antidotes just a must-have. Yeah, that's another good point. I mean, I ran into this with my campaign with Roland Banks and Joe Diamond. I mean, you're running 2 low agility investigators through the Forgotten Age, and the poison is punishing. If you get hit by it, it doesn't seem like it's too bad at the beginning, but once you run into some of those enemies that have the poison, that interact with the poison mechanic, and a lot of those treacheries that affect you if you're poisoned, man, they can grind you down pretty quickly. And yeah, if you're just taking meds and medicine all the time just to avoid being poisoned, you're not taking some of the other more interesting supplies. And so I think if they do that, I think you raise a good point, Dan, that if they change this, if they change the supply system, I think they could bump it up a couple points, so people could take some medicine as well as some of these other interesting, supplies. Because if they're going to add abilities to cards that involve some of these less used supplies, then you're going to need somebody who can take them. And if all they're doing is saying, well, we've got to take medicine to survive, we've got to take food to survive, screw the binoculars, screw the compass, all that stuff, we're not going to take it, then you're sort of defeating the purpose of the design, and you're not going to be able to, the upgrade expansion isn't going to have the type of effect that you want. And I'm sure that poison was a central mechanic to the Forgotten Age campaign. Poison, snakes are poisonous. It's going to play a role, and it will probably get beefed up a little bit in this upgrade. So you're probably going to want to take medicine more. So I think it would make sense to give players a few more points to play with, so that they don't necessarily feel the need to sit there and plow everything into to medicine every time they get a resupply point. So that, there's a new upgrade, the new upgraded expansion. We've also got, of course, we've got Arkham Horror coming up as well. I'm expecting a new announcement for the next cycle should be coming up here shortly, so that will be very exciting indeed. I am betting on Innsmouth, but who knows? We have been surprised in the past, so We shall see. I'm just taking a quick look here at the list of player cards. Now, if we're getting two cards each for each class, presumably, so we know that Survival Knife is the one for Guardian. That leaves Handcuffs, Venturer, Scene of the Crime, Second Wind, Trusted, Intrepid, Take the Initiative. Upgraded Venturer would be interesting, I think. Handcuffs haven't really taken off, so I could definitely see those getting a boost, especially because the Handcuffs deal a lot with humanoid enemies, which those cultists are, and the snakes are. I think the snakes are anyway. Yeah, the Handcuffs might see a bump. And what else do we have here? Scene of the Crime, I think it's fine. Second Wind, I don't see Take the Initiative, I wouldn't see changing. Intrepid is a skill, and Trusted is already an upgrade. So yeah, I guess I would bet on maybe maybe they'll have a cheaper, I don't know, I can't imagine them having a cheaper flamethrower. That seems kind of, or an M1918 bar. Custom ammunition is 3. I can't see them having a reduced one on that. Who knows, maybe marksmanship. I know they did Eat Lead. Was it Eat Lead in the Path to Carcosa? So maybe the guns will get an upgrade. Now Seekers, there is one I would like to see, and that is an upgraded Dr. Ellie Horowitz. I think she is an ideal candidate for the upgrade treatment. I'd love to see her. I think an upgrade for her would be the perfect upgrade for her would be to be able to hold more than one relic asset, because her text sort of alludes to the fact that she might be able to do that at some point. So I think it would be pretty cool if you could have Dr. Ellie loaded up with relics and carting them around behind you in the jungle. Some of the others out that are here, I mean, I've heard talk that there's probably going to be another Ancient Stone, which would make sense given that past. I believe in the Dunwich Legacy, Return of the Dunwich Legacy, we got another Strange Solution, and we got another Ancient Glyphs, was it? So I wouldn't be surprised if we see another Ancient Stone. So that would be Ancient Stone and Truth from Fiction. I assume Truth will simply add more secrets to stuff and maybe have a little bit of a bonus on top of that. Survivors, we already know On Your Own is one of them, so that leaves we've got Impromptu Barrier, Improvised Weapon, Dumb Luck, Winging It, Last Chance, Take Heart. Those are already really good cards. Stunning Blow, I could see Stunning Blow getting an upgrade. Live and Learn is already really good. So maybe an upgrade. I could see an upgraded Improvised Weapon. I think that might be something they would go for. But yeah, all the rest of them, I mean, Survivors are always they've always got such great cards that it's hard to pick. And there, of course, they with that self-imposed limit of the 3 experience point cap up until On Your Own, of course. Now that's a 6. So we'll see about that. What do rogues get? Well, the Cult Vest Pocket, I don't think anybody's played that. It may see more play now. I think there's a card in Dream Eaters that it works well with. Decorated Skull, maybe? I could see that. A slightly better Decorated Skull, maybe one that starts with some charges in play. That could certainly be a possibility. Maybe another level of Fence, although Fence doesn't see tons of play. An upgraded Lucky Cigarette Case, that would be pretty good. I think that would actually make a lot of sense. They could do something similar with Lucky Cigarette Case as they did with pickpocketing. That could be a good one. The rest of them, yeah, none of the other cards really wow me. So I'd probably say Lucky Cigarette Case or Decorated Skull would be my pick. I don't think we see a rogue card in the card fan, so there are two slots open for that. So some interesting choices there. Mystics, we already know we're getting Mists of Relier something. We've got Mists 0 and Mists 4, so it's either got to be 2, 3, or 5. And we also know that we're getting the Chthonian Stone, an upgraded Chthonian Stone. So that won't be we won't see that. So Mystics are taken care of. So Rogues are the real wild card here. We don't know what the Rogues are going to get, but Mystics are all settled if they're only getting 2. As far as neutrals, the only neutral was Backpack or Ornate Bow. I mean, Ornate Bow, I'm not sure how they could. I mean, it already sees a ton of play in a lot of decks, so I'm not too sure what they could do to. I guess they could make a level 5 version that would be even better. Maybe it would have. I don't know. It couldn't have more than 1 ammo, but maybe make. They could make an upgraded Ornate Bow, maybe making it a response, like turning the action to knock an arrow into a response. That exhausts the bow or something like that, so you can get 2 shots out of it before you have to reload it the hard way. So that might be something. Thermos, no, I don't think that's going to see anything. Time Ward Brand, probably not. That would have to be like something lower to bridge that gap between between like a machete and 5. And Trench Coat. So yeah, so there are some interesting options out there for them to look at, and we will find out in a few months' time what the designers have in mind. So unless you guys have any more questions, I'm gonna call it there, and we will. That will do it for this look at the return to the Forgotten Age. We knew this one was coming. It was just a matter of time, and it will be here in a short matter of months, and we will get to once again experience the joys and woes that is the Forgotten Age campaign. Some really good scenarios in it, but some really tough scenarios as well that I would rather not play anymore. So hopefully they will be, designer Matt Newman will wave his magic wand and be able to fix those ones, and we will have an amazing campaign that we can play through from start to finish. But so thanks everyone. Yes, praying for good balance. That would be, I think that's all we can hope for. And I know, given past what they did with the Lord of the Rings living card game, they have been able to go in and tweak scenarios in the past to change them quite radically, to make scenarios that were once sort of loathed to be much more playable. So I do have confidence in the designers that they can make the necessary changes to bring those scenarios into line if that's what their goal is. So welcome to the stream, C. Anderson. Thanks very much. Glad you could make it. Thanks everyone for joining me here tonight. I was actually going to sit down and record some playthroughs tonight, but here we are talking about Return to the Forgotten Age. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will be back here in the near future with some more great Arkham Horror LCG content for you. So thank you very much for joining me tonight. That's going to do it for this episode. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. If you need to contact me, I can be reached at manfromleng@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter at manfromleng. Until the stars are right, keep your shotgun close and your elder sign closer. Take care out there, and happy investigating.